and James. Nice to see you both.
Yeah.
Tell us, what is Brigade and the idea behind it?
Sure. Brigade is a small tech company in San Francisco that is trying to use best-in-class social and mobile technology to reinvent the way that citizens interact with the political system and with each other around civic issues.
So, as was just mentioned there, we have elections just gone on Tuesday, and you had basically a beta user base in San Francisco and Manchester, New Hampshire. How did that go?
Yeah, I mean, it went, hello again, everyone. I feel weird coming back only 30 minutes later and just doing the same thing. Went really well. So what we wanted to do was build what we called an interactive ballot guide. For years we've talked about the fact that people, head into elections, municipal elections, maybe they know who they're going to vote for mayor, and then once they get sort of past the one or two offices at the top, there's a bunch of people that they've never heard of, offices they've never heard of, and so they do one of two things. They either don't vote or they guess, both of which are terrible outcomes. And so what the product allowed people to do was express their opinions on local issues. So we partnered in San Francisco, we partnered with the Chronicle, and we then connected them with professional organizations who basically vetted candidates and made endorsements. And based on those, your answers and those organizations' endorsements, we generated custom recommendations for you. And the product was really great. Completion on it was really high. We had really high adoption in both cities from our existing user bases. What we need to do now is actually go through the process of looking at, of the people who said they voted to us, we want to go and get the voter rolls and indicate did actually turn out. And we can start to back into, okay, were the people who knew that their friends voting more likely to vote? And there's a bunch of science we're going to do around that.
And in terms of, and I know you're probably waiting on numbers and, to see that beta, but, could you see broadly, was it mostly young people, or was it kind of across the age and demographics and everything?
Well, we know from our beta test cohort that we index really high on millennials. So I think in the US population, the millennial generation represents about 25% of the population. On our app, it's over 60%. And I think that's just an indication of how disconnected, in a way, from the kind of the traditional modes of communication and engagement most millennials are. I think they're looking for an alternative. And so we're very excited to have a younger demographic engaging with the platform. To go back to the ballot test for a moment, and I think this relates to what that younger demographic's experience of technology is today. I thought the most compelling part of the product experience we built for this election test were these social notifications that you got when your friends participated. So when James filled out his ballot, I got a notification. Well, you're not able to vote in the U.S., but nonetheless, when he was, faking it with the tool, I got a notification telling me that James had just filled out his ballot and he knew who he was voting for. Similarly, when he actually went to vote, he was able to confirm that he had voted, and that was a great reminder that I should also participate. So tapping into that idea that all of my friends are doing this and I should be doing it as well is a big part of the experience that we're trying to build.
And so I think the title of this talk is rather loftily, Building a Social Network for Democracy. And I guess probably, I'm guessing one of the biggest challenges that you guys are going to face is, these conversations are happening already on Twitter and on Facebook, not exclusively about politics, but there's discussions happening there. How do you think you're going to get the population broadly to come and join Brigade?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. The reason we're bullish on that piece of it is that we think that neither of those platforms provide the right context or structure the right relationships for political discourse. We think Twitter's closer to it, but I actually don't think Twitter is the kind of property that most people use in that way. I think some small percentage of people use it as a broadcast channel, but you don't really have that kind of discourse for the average user. Sure. Facebook, everybody has the hyper-political friend who puts stuff into their feed. And in many ways, that is a bit of a faux pas within the network. I have a friend who is super political, and pump stuff into Facebook, and he always assesses.
Matt, is it?
No, it's not. Mahan's pretty good, actually. His is mostly pictures of his meals.
That's a lie.
That is a lie, actually. But this person basically assesses, assigns his political posts a controversiality index, measured by how many friends he loses on each post he puts into Facebook, which is to say that Facebook is a naturally affirmative place for friends, family, life events. It's not a place where you're trying to, that's appropriate for political discussion. So the context piece we think is big, and we've already seen that within the app at the moment. We have a small, because it is a private beta, a small cohort of people using the app very, very aggressively to participate in civic discussion.
Yeah.
The relationship piece is the other one. It may be the case that people in your social graph or people in your graph on Twitter are the people that you need to be connected with to be politically active. But there's also a whole lot of people who live in your district, who maybe think like you on certain issues, that you should be connected with to be politically active. And those platforms don't provide an easy way to form those connections and activate them. So those are the two things we're trying to build for.
Yeah.
I'd also just interject that one of the advantages we have over the existing social networks is that we're building our functionality to be special purpose for organizing. We're actually building a utility for peer-to-peer organizing and engagement. And so what I mean by that is we're optimizing the experience to help people find other like-minded people, help them identify the issues that they care most about, and then giving them tools to take action collectively. And that's just not something that is easy to do through Facebook or Twitter today.
And you mentioned in your beta group that there was, the kind of hyperactive users, the political anoraks, I guess. And I see that, within Twitter, within Facebook, we often hear about how great social media can be for democracy, etc. But it's very often it's the same core group of people that are using these tools for social issues. Do you worry that Brigade will attract that kind of core base of hyperactive users? But how do you get people who aren't like me, normal people, to use the app?
It's a great question. We like to...
I love how you got through that whole description without saying the political crazies. That was a really good effort. Sure, you have thoughts on this?
Well, we like to joke that the way to build a political network is to not make it about politics and to instead meet people where they are and start with the issues that affect their lives and engage them in a conversation about what they think about those issues. And so that's how we've designed the app. When you come into the app, and you can all go to the App Store, iOS or Android, and give it a try. You are agreeing or disagreeing with simple statements of belief, and we think over time getting local with those is going to be really compelling. And so we're trying to make it as accessible to ordinary citizens as possible and start with the things that they care about and then show them that they are not alone, there are other people who care about those things, and that there are ways for them to take action, probably starting with pretty small actions like signing petitions, to move those issues forward. And so I think that's part of our theory for how to make it accessible. I also think just making it really social. I mean, there hasn't been a lot of investment in this space. Most kind of civic tech products really focus on, they're very information heavy, or they're very focused on candidates and campaigns and the outcomes of political races, and that's not actually where most people spend their time. So we're trying to really bring it down to what do you care about, what's happening in the news, those sorts of things.
And so obviously, big year next year. A la Trump. But I guess, can you talk, in terms of your plans for 2016? I think we were talking backstage about there's more than 500,000 elected officials in the US. In terms of scale, this could be a problem, just because it's so vast. What is your plans for 2016, and how granular are you guys hoping to get?
I mean, I think when we think about 2016, I think what's obvious to us is that this is the moment in time every 4 years where more people care about politics than watch the Super Bowl. 130 million people or so will vote next year. And so there's an opportunity where you can use that media event that is, discourse and discussion around the presidential election as a gateway drug to try and bring more localized, down ballot political issues to people's attention. So I think thematically we see the opportunity, and that's why, from a time perspective, we're doing what we're doing as a company. In terms of the scale issue that you just alluded to, it's massive, and it can't be understated. You're talking about 520,000 elected officials. In fact, the fact that we don't know exactly how many people there are is indicative of the issue. It's very decentralized data. It's held at the state level, exclusively. It's in different formats. It's very different shape files. It's almost impossible to. No one has gathered it all together in a single place. So the data problem alone is massive. Even if we can solve that problem, I think the other issue, and a lot of the reason we built these very deeply down ballot experiences in Manchester and San Francisco this year was to learn. These were 2 pilots we ran to try and say, okay, how do we market this to people? How do we get people in the top of the funnel, and will they complete? What are people pledging their votes for? So I think coming out of this test, we're going to reflect on what worked and what didn't work. We're then going to think about, based on the massive data challenges about collecting the data, what's the right balance between breadth and depth. But the one thing for sure is that we're going to have people's attention, and that's an opportunity.
Yeah, so, obviously, as you said, you've got to assess, I guess, what happened this week, but the plan is to go national in 2016?
Sure. The reality is that from a data perspective, the easiest races to map in our system are going to be at a federal level. There are data sets and APIs available to also map the state level. But when you get beneath that to the other 500,000 elected offices in the US, as James said, there's no definitive database. And so we're just going to start chipping away at that. This is a massive data problem. It's something that will take probably many years, probably a few cycles for any platform to fully map. And we've got to do it in a way that the data can stay fresh, that people want to update it. And that's a tough problem to solve. So I think it's kind of inevitable that we'll be starting at a national level in federal offices, but then looking to run tests like the one we just ran, because for the average citizen who wants to have an impact, voting for president isn't the most compelling thing. It's maybe the thing that gets them in the door, but your vote, frankly, doesn't have a big impact on the outcome of the presidential election, unless you think you are the one vote over 50% in the one state that's gonna flip the election. It may not really matter in that kind of narrow sense. It matters in a more kind of philosophic sense. But in this local election test, I think the vote margin for mayor of Manchester, New Hampshire was 100 votes.
100 votes.
Is that right? That's for the mayor of a city. And you get down to, we did some analysis that indicated that for those 520,000 elected offices in the US, about almost half of them are decided by fewer than 1,000 votes. So I think if you can start to make those numbers explicit for people and say, okay, you're a registered voter in this district, here are your other fellow citizens, here's how many of you there are, these are the issues you care about, and here's the vote margin for these elected offices for school board and transportation board and city council. It starts to become very real, very accessible, and more human scale, which is something that's actually been missing from at least American politics for quite a while now.
I downloaded the app. It is a great app, by the way. It's a beautiful app. And everybody here should download it. But in terms of, and I think it's true for millennials in that people are moving to closed networks, so whether it's WhatsApp or Snapchat, and there's certainly the perception exists that, people are being, I think, less open on public social, Facebook, Twitter, because maybe they think it could, impact job opportunities, etc. When you log into Brigade, you're asked some questions on gun control, maybe foreign policy, etc. Do you worry that people might be kind of put off by that, or is your experience with this beta test been the opposite, that people are open to sharing their views on these issues?
The data's great. People are pretty open. So we're also concerned about that. The 3 that people always talk about are gun rights, abortion, and same-sex marriage. Those are the 3 things that everyone's like, yeah, nah, people won't answer positions on this. So currently, the kind of bundles of positions that we're giving people, completion rates are very high. The reality is that my sense is as this scales, it will probably naturally lead to people maybe being more closed down the track. As it gains weight as a platform, that's the moment then people say, well, actually, this is a thing now. I need to be a little bit more careful with the way I use it. That's okay. Like, we wanted to start from the position that more open is better. We wanted to start by being a platform where it is safe to discuss prickly political issues, And over time, if we need to change defaults, if we need to make the ability to change answers, hide answers, etc., we can build those things in as we see needs. Even now on the product, if you want to skip a position, you can do it. If you want to mark an answer private, you can do that as well. But we wanted to start as open as we could, and then we can narrow after the fact. So at the moment, it's working out.
Yeah. It's also interesting that on Facebook, when you express a political opinion, it is in isolation, and that opinion then represents who you are and what you stand for. On Brigade, you're weighing in on tons of issues, and they're very granular, and there's a lot of nuance, and you see that actually you have a certain amount of overlap with everyone, even your most conservative or your most liberal friends. And so, is that the political spectrum here?
Sure.
More or less? Okay.
Yeah. Our two main political parties here are centre-right, I guess. But that's a conversation for another day. In terms of monetizing this, so let's say a year down the road, dream scenario, you have 1 million active users. How do you make money from this?
Yeah, it's still really early, but I think you look at a lot of these big platforms, and there's an opportunity to become, when you're at scale, to become a matchmaker between the two sides of the marketplace that exists in the political system. So you have candidates, you have advocacy organizations, you have all of these formal and professional people and organizations that have goals and need to get things done. They need to get elected, they need to pass legislation, they need to rally support for their cause. And to do any of that, they need the support of ordinary people who are currently disengaged and disorganized and really not plugged into the system. And so if we're able to get to some scale around citizens engaging proactively and collectively in the system, I think we'll be the kind of the place that groups go to find support. And so playing that matchmaker role is probably the most logical place to try to monetize.
Okay. And in terms of just this whole sector, I guess, of political discourse online, the people who invest in this, is there a lot of people interested in this sphere in terms of, I mean, I'm speaking outside of Brigade. What's the landscape like right now?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's. I think it is changing. I think Silicon Valley as a whole is becoming more political, which means that I think the investing class is also becoming more political and interested, and with political savviness goes an understanding of politics as a business. And so I think those two macros generally, increased interest in politics and increased understanding of politics as a business, are the two things that are actually lead to increased investment in the space. I think you're also just seeing traditional consumer investing organizations looking at kind of different verticals now more generally, whether they're education, medical, travel, etc. I meant transportation, not travel. So I think those things are generally good. However, make no mistake about it, it's a tougher pitch than we're a gaming company that has a freemium model, because there's no way to easily map us to an existing successful company. Like, so much of VC is pattern matching, and there's nothing that kind of they can point to. OpenGov is scaling pretty well now, which the Palantir guys did. So I think that's interesting. But yeah, I think the pattern matching is the challenge.
Well, I think we've just about run out of time, but one final question. Do you think Trump is going to get the nomination? Do you think he's going to go all the way?
I've been calling it for Rubio for a couple months now, and it seems good right now. I mean, we'll see.
There's a lot of money behind Rubio, right? And I think the Democrats think that Rubio's going to get the nomination too. A lot of attack ads going against him. But how far do you see the Trump train going?
We've all saying that the train was going to fall off the tracks for months, and it just hasn't. So I don't know. Maybe it's going to keep going. Great. It'd be great if it did. It's great television.
Very entertaining, yes. Matt, James, thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.